Hi, and welcome to my channel. Or if you're a returning subscriber, hi again. It's so nice to see you back here for another video. My name's Teslark, and today I'm going to show you how you can use epoxy resin and alcohol ink to create a 3D epoxy resin rainbow bloom. As always, I'll have all the materials that I used for this project linked in the description below, so all of that information will be down there for you. And let's just hop into today's video. I started out by mixing up a big batch of resin because I am working on a couple different projects today, but this mold typically holds roughly 80 milliliters of resin. I am going to be pouring this in 2 separate layers though, so I'm not going to be filling up my mold completely the first time. I'm going to need some white resin to make my flowers, so I sectioned off just a little bit of that clear resin, about 20 milliliters or so, and I'm going to be adding some alcohol ink by Pinata Colors to that. And I'm just using their color Blanco Blanco, which is just a really nice white. It's always a good idea to give your alcohol inks a little bit of a shake before you add them to your resin, as sometimes the pigment can settle at the bottom, so you want to make sure that the pigment is really well incorporated before you start incorporating it into your resin. So I've just dropped a few drops of my white alcohol ink here, and then I'm going to use a popsicle stick to make sure that all of that alcohol ink is really thoroughly and evenly incorporated throughout my resin. You can always add a bit more alcohol ink if you need to, if you're finding that your resin still isn't quite opaque enough, and a good way to see how it's looking is to check on the bottom of your popsicle stick. But don't add too much pigment to start with, because if you do add too much pigment and you mess up the resin to pigment ratio, you can have some problems with curing. So you always want to keep it about 90% resin to 10% pigment. After I've got my white resin all mixed up, I like to let it sit off to the side for a couple minutes, and then I'll come back and hit it with a heat gun to pop any bubbles that have risen to the surface. After that, my next step is going to be to put this in a sandwich bag, which I'll be using as a piping bag. And in order to do that, I'm just going to take a clean cup and place an empty sandwich bag inside that, so it's nice and open. And then I'll pour all of my white resin into that bag, making sure that I'm using my popsicle stick to scrape the sides of the cup to make sure that I can get all of the pigmented resin that I possibly can. And just a quick reminder, if you are finding this video to be helpful or useful, or you're getting value out of it in any way, please don't forget to give me a like. It not only helps out my channel a whole lot, but it also lets me know that I'm making content that you want to see from me. Now that I have that white resin sectioned off into my sandwich bag, I'm going to get all of that resin to one corner and carefully close the bag, trying to make sure that I'm not getting too much air in the bag as well. And then I will twist this off and set it to the side for use a little bit later. I would suggest not cutting your bag open until right before you're going to use it, because as soon as you do cut it open, you'll start spilling resin everywhere, and so to minimize mess, I just keep it closed until right before I'm going to use it. And now that I've got my white resin all ready to go, I'm going to make the center of my flower, and to do that, I'm going to be using some gold leaf. So I've got some sheets of gold leaf here along with another very small measuring cup, and I'm just going to use my fingers to break up that gold leaf until it's in much smaller pieces. And I don't want the gold leaf to be so small that it's like a powder or like glitter, but I definitely don't want large pieces either. So just using my fingers here to break up all that gold leaf and make sure that I get all those little pieces into my measuring cup. Next, I'll use my popsicle stick to drizzle just a little bit of resin into my measuring cup. And I'm doing it this way instead of pouring some resin in, because you really don't want too much resin mixed in with your gold leaf. You want it to stay together as a sort of a paste. You don't want it to be super flowy, otherwise it's going to flow throughout the entire piece. Now that we've got all the elements of this project set up, let's go ahead and make our flower. I'm starting out by pouring some of my clear resin into the mold, and like I said earlier, we will be pouring this piece in 2 layers, so you want to give yourself a good amount of working space and not pour the mold completely full. Next, I'll use the heat gun on the higher setting to pop any bubbles that are forming in the resin. After I've popped my air bubbles and the resin is nice and clear, I'm going to use 2 popsicle sticks and take a little bit of that gold leaf and resin mixture that we made a little bit earlier and just drop that down into the center of my mold. And then after one more quick hit with my heat gun, it's going to be time to start layering in the colors. And the colors I'm using today are all alcohol inks by Pinata Colors. I'm using the Santa Fe Red, the Sunbright Yellow, Lime Green, Baja Blue, and the Passion Purple. And just a reminder, I will have all the materials that I use for this project linked in the description below, so if you're curious about the resin I'm using or any of the pigments that I'm using, all of that information is going to be there for you. Next, I'm simply going to start layering in my colors, and as you can see here, the inks do expand quite a bit, so I'll just need a few drops of each different color. I'm adding a little bit more yellow here because I'm hoping that some of that red and yellow will mix to orange. I don't have orange alcohol ink on hand, so I'm just going to use the red and the yellow. And I do want a rainbow effect in this piece, so I'm just going along with all of the colors of the rainbow. So I've got my green, my blue, and finishing it up with purple, making sure that I'm getting that pigment pretty close to the side of my mold as well. I used a pair of scissors to make a small hole in the tip of my piping bag off camera, and now I'm going to take my white resin and starting from the center just around the outside of that gold leaf, I'm going to trace a spiral pattern till I get towards the outside of the mold. And I do find this to be one of the easiest ways to make 3D epoxy blooms, but there's also a couple other techniques, and I've got some videos up here on YouTube, so I'll make sure to link some of those in the description down below as well, so you can check them out when you're done with this video. Now that I've got my spiral down, I'm going to use a clean popsicle stick, and I'm going to drag that white resin from the outside of the mold into the center. And as you can see, I'm also just using a piece of paper towel to clean off my popsicle stick in between. And I'd love to know what you're working on in the comments down below. Is there a project that you can't wait to get started? Is there something that you're working on? Is there a new technique that you've been wanting to try? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love learning from you guys and hearing what you guys are working on. Once I've worked my way fully around the mold and I've got all of those lines pulled in and I'm happy with how my flower's looking, I'm going to hit it with the heat gun one more time, once again to pop any air bubbles. And then next I'm going to be covering this up and letting it cure completely before pouring my second layer of resin. So I'll let this layer of resin cure from anywhere from 12 to 24 hours just to make sure that it's solid enough before I pour my second layer. Alright, and with the power of video editing, here we are in the future. So I went ahead and I mixed up another 100 milliliters of resin, once again off camera to save some time, and to that I'm going to be adding some Mattia Black Alcohol Ink by Pinata Colors. And this is way more resin than I'm going to need for this particular piece, but I am working on a couple pieces today, so I mixed up a little bit extra. If I were going to be mixing up enough just to pour the second layer onto this specific piece, I would probably mix up anywhere from 50 to 80 milliliters of resin, just because I hate when I don't have enough resin to finish a project, but I also hate wasting resin. So it's kind of a fine line to walk, but you kind of get used to it. And then once again, just making sure that that resin is really thoroughly pigmented, checking how it looks on the bottom of my popsicle stick before moving on to the next step, which will be pouring this into my mold. So this is how the piece is looking after 24 hours of it setting up, and I'm just going to pour some of my black resin right on top of that piece. And you want to work slowly, the resin is quite viscous, so I'm not going to pour it till it's all the way full because I'm going to let the resin kind of settle and figure out where it's going to end up. This resin is also self-leveling, so it will spread quite a bit. Here I'm using my heat gun not only to pop some of those surface bubbles, but also to warm up the resin, as when the resin gets warmer, it gets even more liquidy and easy to move around. So just using a little bit of gravity to sort of tilt my piece and get it into all of those nooks and crannies. And once I've got a nice even layer of this black resin, I'll go ahead and once again let this cure overnight before pulling it out of the mold. Alright, so I went ahead and I let my piece set up overnight. It's totally cured, nice and solid, so let's go ahead and pop it out of the mold and see how it turned out. From the back, it's looking really cool already. I can see all of these different colors, and I'm very excited to see how it looks. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, I kind of love how this green overlapped with the blue in there. Very, very neat. I'm also getting a good separation in colors. Got a little bit of orange in there, even though I didn't use an orange alcohol ink. And overall, I think that this is so cute and absolutely perfect for Pride Month. Ooh, there's even like a little section in here where we get some of all of the different colors. This really turned out super neat. I think if I were to make it again, I would do less spirals because I do think it's a little bit busy, but overall I'm super happy with this piece and I can't wait to hear what you guys think of it in the comments. As always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending part of your day with me, especially if you made it all the way to this point in the video. And if you did make it this far, leave me some sort of rainbow emoji or really colorful emojis in the comments just so that I know that you made it. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button as I do post weekly. And if you'd like to see some more resin art tutorials from me, make sure to check out the video that's going to pop up on the screen any minute, and I will see you there. Bye!